Once again, everyone, this episode of the podcast is sponsored by I Love Growing Marijuana, because when you're ready to grow your own cannabis, you're going to need some seeds, and they will more than likely have the variety you want. Right now, you can get a 10-pack of Durban Poison regular seeds for $60. So click on the link in the show notes to get you to I Love Growing Marijuana and pick up some seeds. Now don't forget, Delta Leaf Labs has that plant DNA sex testing kit you're going to need. They make it really easy to get a sample from your seedling. You're going to send that sample back to the lab, and a couple of days after they get it, you're going to know whether you've got a male or a female plant. So go over to deltaleaflabs.com, order your testing kits today, and at checkout, use promo code IMGS10 to get 10% off of that order. Alright, now let's get started. Brothers and sisters, welcome back. This is the In My Grow Show, the podcast dedicated to taking the mystery out of cannabis. I'm your host, Alex. And I want to thank you for listening once again. This is episode number 50. So as you know, I didn't have a show last week. And that's mostly because I decided to take the time off and watch the big game. You see, Sundays is the day that I put the show together. I'll record it, edit it, get all the music mixed in. If I have an interview I've got to drop in there. That's just the day I put it all together, and it takes me about 6, maybe 8 hours. So I decided, instead of trying to rush and get the show together and still make kickoff, I was just going to take the day off and enjoy the Super Bowl, which I gotta say was pretty fucking boring. But shout out to Ardas for putting on an awesome Super Bowl party. The guy killed it. He roasted a pig. It was amazing. It was delicious. Speaking of which, if you're a Grateful Dead fan, he has a radio show called Grateful Grooves. Yes, that's right. The man is actually on terrestrial radio. I think it's one of the longest running Grateful Dead shows out there. Anyways, go find it. Check it out if you're a Grateful Dead fan. It is called Grateful Grooves. A little later, I'm going to play a conversation that I had with Dr. Stefan Kirchanski, who is also a lawyer that specializes in plant patents. And he was nice enough to get on the phone with me to explain to me how a plant patent actually works. I'm also going to have the pest of the week, and it's going to be on the root aphid. Speaking of bugs, though, there is a cool website I found on the internet to help identify bugs, whether they're pests or predators. It is bugguide.net, and that is BUGGUIDE.net. Thought it was a really cool place to go to. Really easy to navigate. Go over there and check it out if you've got any kind of bug questions. Now this week, I don't have a strain of the week, but I do want to give it up to everyone making those homemade edibles. Holy cow. A buddy of mine gave me a couple of edibles. They were 600 milligrams each. One was a brownie, one was a Rice Krispie treat. I gotta tell you, the brownie was awesome. It was real chocolatey, real fudgy. It would have been really easy to just, inhale the whole thing. But I didn't do that. I cut it up into smaller pieces first because I still had to be semi-crisp for the rest of my day. But like I said, God bless those homemade edibles. Whew. Thank you, Josh, brother. I appreciate that. All right, and now for the report from the Cannabis Front Line. I'm going to read to you an article I came across at the NORML website. That is normal.org. And the title of the article is CBD-Dominant Cannabis Oil Safe and Effective in Autistic Patients. And this comes out of Jerusalem, Israel. And it says, the administration of plant-derived cannabis extract is effective and well tolerated in patients diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, according to data published in the journal Scientific Reports. Israeli investigators assessed the safety and efficacy of the daily administration of CBD-enriched cannabis oil consisting of 30% CBD to 1.5% THC. In a cohort of 188 patients with ASD, autism spectrum disorder. Of these patients who continued treatment for 6 months and provided feedback to researchers, over 90% reported some level of symptomatic improvement, including reductions in restlessness, seizures, and rage attacks. Approximately 1/3 of the respondents reported a reduction in their intake of other medications. That's pretty cool to hear, and that's the kind of human-based research that we need. It also says, Authors concluded cannabis as a treatment for autism spectrum disorder patients appears to be well-tolerated, safe, and seemingly effective option to relieve symptoms, mainly seizures, tics, depression, restlessness, and rage attacks. We believe that double-blind, placebo-controlled trials are crucial for a better understanding of the cannabis effects on ASD patients. Something else I wanted to talk about during this frontline report is that for a few weeks now, I've been talking to a couple of friends of mine about the need for information and education in the Spanish-speaking community. And this is an issue for me because I am Mexican-American. And I do have relatives who mostly just speak Spanish. And they have a very old-fashioned view of what cannabis use is and what a regular cannabis user looks like. So I'm going to start to bring some of the information that I come across in Spanish out to the wider public. How exactly am I going to do that? I really don't know yet. I don't know if I'm going to have, Spanish-speaking episodes only. I'm not sure, but I do know that I am going to start to move in that direction. The main thing that has stopped me so far from doing this, because I've thought about it, is that I don't know, the medical terminology for cannabis in Spanish. For instance, how to say the endocannabinoid system. I just recently learned that. And that is el sistema endocannabinoide. And it hasn't been easy to find good information out there in Spanish that I can bring to everyone. But there is some out there. One of the websites that I found, I'm just going to read the website. It is oedmc.com. And that's the website for the Observatorio Español de Cannabis Medicinal. And I think that's a good place to start if you want to find some information that you can share with your relatives or people in your life that don't speak English very fluently, who are, more fluent in Spanish. So that's the goal. That's what I'm going to start doing. Like I said, don't know what that's going to look like, but I am going to start pushing this conversation forward in that direction in some way. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing the show in English either. No, don't worry about that. I can do them both, can't I? Couldn't I? Yeah, why not? Why are you trying to box me in? All right, so that's the report from the Cannabis Front Line. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the pest of the week, which is the root aphid. I wrote an article about root aphids. If you go to inmygrow.com and just type in the search window root aphids, the whole article will come up. I'm going to read from that. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is kind of long. I'm just going to read some of the major bullet points I think you should know about. But like I said, you can go over to the website and read the whole thing at your leisure. Okay, first of all, the root aphid is in the Phylloxera family of insects. More specifically, it is a pemphigus species, and it will feed on the roots of many different plants. The bodies are going to be about 1 millimeter long and more pear-shaped than oval. They sometimes get misdiagnosed as mealybugs. Mealybugs are more oval shape. And it's also going to have these little cornicles at its butt, like these two little tailpipes. If you look at it with the jeweler's loupe, you can tell. Also, as you move down the body, it's also going to have like little rings at the back of them. If you get a jeweler's loupe or you get some kind of magnification, you'll see what I'm talking about. These aphids are going to come in many different colors. They're going to be either a brownish orange to a yellowish green, maybe even a pinkish white. But more typically, they're about either a white or a brown. Another reason why they get misidentified as mealybugs is because the root aphid will also leave behind this waxy, this white waxy cast or like molted skin, the skin that they shed, they leave that behind. So it's going to be this little white kind of powdery stuff. Like most little devil pests, the root aphid is incredible when it comes to reproducing. And here's why I say that. The root aphid will reproduce asexually during the spring and summer months, which means unmated adult female aphids will give birth to living young, all of which are going to be female. And in their lifetime, they're going to put out about 60 to 100 of those live little nymphs. Their lifespan lasts about 20 to 30 days. And depending on the environment, those nymphs are going to take about 7 to 10 days to mature. Here's the other crazy thing about them. In the fall, the root aphid will sense when winter is coming, and male winged aphids will start to develop. Those males are going to mate with the females, okay? Those females are going to lay some eggs, either in the dirt or, just above the root line of a plant or on a leaf. And that's how those root aphids are going to overwinter. After the winter goes by, temperature starts to warm up, those little aphids are going to hatch, and the cycle of infestation continues. So these root aphids, they are suckers. They like to suck the sap out of those roots. As they feed, they're going to go through and scar up those roots. They're going to leave it exposed, leave it open to the elements. Very easy for molds and mildews and disease to come in and attack the plant. Another thing is, just like other pests, root aphids are going to poop out this little honeydew that is going to do two things. One, it's going to let sooty mold start to grow on it. And two, it's going to attract ants. Now, the first sign of root aphid attack is that your plant is going to start to slow down. It's not going to be growing as vigorously as it once was. It's going to look a little withered. The leaves are going to start to yellow. Sometimes root aphid attack is misdiagnosed as magnesium deficiency. So if you think you have a magnesium deficiency, go ahead, add a little magnesium to see if that helps. But at the same time, check your soil. Dig down about an inch, inch and a half. Get your jeweler's loupe, look at that soil for a while, stare at it. If you see these little white buggers crawling around, then you know you've got them. Another crazy thing that the root aphid is going to do as the infestation grows, as it gets more populated, also as the plant starts to die and lose nutrients, some of those adult aphids are going to grow wings and fly off to infect other healthy plants. And because they grow wings, sometimes people think they're fungus gnats. But they're a little different if you look at them. Fungus gnats look more sleek and slender like a mosquito. The root aphid with wings does not. It looks a little more kind of less like a mosquito. Rounder, I guess you could say. You can fight back root aphids kind of the same way you do with fungus gnats. Just don't take a wait-and-see attitude with these little buggers because they will damage your plant. So as soon as you see the first sign of them, put a plan into action. Okay, don't wait and see how far you can get. No, just unless you're going to see how long it takes them to kill your plant, do something. Now, you can use the yellow sticky cards, little sticky traps, to catch the adult flyers. But those sticky traps aren't going to do much for the ones that are crawling in the soil. Also, once again, don't overwater your plants when your soil is overly wet. That just makes it a better place for them to hang out, and they love it there. Another thing you can do is keep a clean grow area. If you have any kind of discarded plant material, don't leave it on the ground. Don't leave it close to your plants. That's just going to, give the aphids another place where they can live and thrive. Just get rid of it. Throw it out, burn it, whatever you do with it. But get it out of your grow area. One of the big things to remember is to rotate your insecticides as far as use different ones that attack them in a different way. For instance, neem oil is going to attack them from the outside. It's going to dry up that waxy cuticle layer that they have and not allow them to molt, so they'll dry up and die. Pyrethrin sprays are going to attack them from the inside out. So things like that, change it up, because they will develop resistance if you're only using one mode of attack. Natural predators are probably the best thing for any kind of pest because there is no resistance against being eaten. Good general predators are green lacewings. The larvae are known as aphid lions, and they will feed on a lot of different species of aphids and mites. However, the adult lacewing, not so much. The adult lacewings are going to mostly feed on nectar, pollen, and honeydew, but the larvae are the real predators there. Also, another one are predatory midge. They're also going to be more active at night, more nocturnal. They're going to hang out low in the plant canopy. Still, another good general predators are also ladybugs, and they're going to take care of any of the aphids that are crawling around on the surface, either on the plant or on the surface of the soil. They're not going to do too much damage to any of the aphids that are actually in the soil. For that, I suggest you get some beneficial nematodes. Beneficial nematodes are the best thing for soil-dwelling pests. Trust me, they will kill the eggs and the larvae. I already mentioned neem oil, I already mentioned pyrethrin. And one more thing I wanted to add is you can use clean play sand, the kind that you buy at a hardware store or at a home improvement store, the kind that come in a bag. And you're going to want to put about 1 inch to 2 inches on the bottom layer of your container and on the top layer of your container. And that sand is going to act basically like glass that the aphids have to crawl through in order to get to the soil. And so it's going to cut them up. Subcool had put up a video about a month ago about how he uses it. I think I saw it on his Instagram page. Anyways, so there you go. Those are just some of the things I think you should know about the root aphid. Like I said, go over to inmygrow.com and look for the article. Just type in root aphid in the search and the article will come up and it'll give you a lot more information. Alright, so next, like I said earlier, I'm going to play for you a conversation I had with Dr. Stefan Kirchanski, who is also a lawyer, and he was and he was really cool guy, really a patient person with me, because I kept confusing the Plant Variety Protection Act and the Plant Patent Act when he was talking to me, and I could tell as he's on the phone with me that he's getting frustrated, but he was really nice about it. He was really cool and just explained it all to me more than once. And Dr. Kirchanski is a partner at Zuber, Lawler, and Del Duca Law Firm. You can find them at zuberlaw.com. Now, before I play the conversation, a couple of things I want to explain. Sexual reproduction is when a plant makes a seed using pollen from a male plant and the female flower. They get together, they make a seed. That's sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is when you make a copy of that plant either through a cutting, like we do when we clone, or by grafting, like they do with fruit trees or any other trees, I guess. So I just wanted to explain that because, like I said, me and the doc go back and forth about stuff. I even got a little confused when I was listening back to it. So, okay, now that explanation is in there, hang tight. I'm going to play a little bit of music, then I'm going to have that conversation. Well, everyone, today I'm excited to have with me on the phone Mr. Stefan Kirchanski, and he's a lawyer. And Stefan, I hope I pronounced your last name right.
It's very close. There's a controversy in my family on how you pronounce it, so you did one job.
Thank you. So, can you do me a favor? Before we get started into the conversation we're about to have, can you introduce yourself a little further, a little better than what I just did?
Sure. My wife claims that I've had 3 careers, and she hopes this is the last one. I started out as a PhD botanist. In fact, I met my wife in graduate school, and my plan was to be an academic. And I went and I had an academic job at the University of Texas at Austin for a couple of years. And I found out, unfortunately, that I loved botany, but I didn't like academics very well. So I did research at Harvard University for a number of years. And then after that, I really didn't want to go back into academics. So I got a job with a company. I wound up working for a medical company. So I did medical research for a Johnson & Johnson company and then for Becton Dickinson. This took about 10 years. And then I got the proverbial boss from hell, you know, the guy in Dilbert that has a little pointy hair.
Sure.
And that drove me to law school because I wasn't, I guess, very imaginative. All I could think of was, hell, I want to get out of here. What else can I do to make a living? So I went to law school, and because I'd worked for a medical company, I've done a lot of medical patents, as you might imagine. But because of my botany background, I've also done kind of both gene-type patents for plants, but also I've done plant patents for things like rose bushes, which we'll talk about, and I've done utility patents for all kinds of gadgets, including plants.
Wow.
Or plant-related inventions. So that's law is the third career. The middle career, the second career was being a scientist in companies. So
you're
I've been doing this for about I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say you're the perfect person to have this conversation with, because I've always wondered, or I often wondered, how is it a company can own a patent on a plant? And then if I keep on that path and take it a few steps further, it's just a matter of how does a company wind up owning a patent for a cannabis plant? And something I found was something called the Plant Variety Protection Act. And what does that say exactly?
Well, there are actually at least two different ways, actually 3 different ways to protect plant-related inventions in the United States. And the kind of the broadest protection would be a utility patent, which is something that covers any kind of an invention. And if you have synthesized genes or novel ways of extracting cannabinoids or anything like that, any kind of invention can be a be a utility patent. And to the extent that you can have genetically modified or unusually genetic plants with unusual properties, that could be a utility patent. It's relatively difficult to get utility patents. The United States has a second way of protecting plant inventions, and this is something that's sort of peculiar to the United States. It's the plant patent, and this was put in the 1920s by a whole bunch of the big old famous inventors in the U.S. People behind it were like Carnegie and Edison and Ford. And the reason that they put this in is that one of their buddies, Luther Burbank, who was really the first big plant breeder in the United States, had just died, and his widow was getting ripped off. She was trying to monetize his last inventions, his last plant varieties, and everyone was stealing them. So his friends and the Congress and everything came up with a plant patent. And this gives you exclusive rights to the reproduction by cuttings. It has to be by an asexual means, or an asexually reproduced plant for the duration of the patent. And since all the important kinds of plant inventions back then that people really thought about were things like fruit trees and rose bushes, things like that, and those were all things that were asexually reproduced by cuttings or by grafts. And so the plant patent was perfect for that. Later on, although other countries did not ever come up with something like a plant patent, many other countries, including the United States, wanted to have some sort of means of protecting breeders' rights for seed reproduced varieties.
Right.
And you just talked about the Plant Protection Act. That's the U.S. version of an international thing that goes by the initials of UPOB, which is basically a universal kind of international thing, protection for seed-grown varieties. And many of the criteria for a plant patent and for a plant protection patent are similar, but the kinds of enforcement that you can use on a plant patent is a lot stronger than for the Variety Protection Act. So that like wheat breeders and corn breeders do Variety Protection Acts, get they register varieties with the University of with the Department of Agriculture, and they get a certificate for a plant variety. This gives them some protection.
Now,
but people that have like fruit trees or anything that can be grown by cuttings, because they have stronger protection for that.
So let me see if I understand.
So that's sort of in a nutshell. Okay.
Okay, so let me see if I understand. So the Plant Variety Protection Act is going to protect the breeders that make the seeds.
It's going to protect the seed. It's going to keep somebody else from taking your seed variety, planting it, and then harvesting a whole bunch of seeds and then selling them. In other words, if you have a new variety and the seed gets out there, or you're selling the seed, it keeps somebody else from growing a whole bunch of seeds and then marketing them. It doesn't stop a farmer or a grower from saving seed to grow the next generation. It just keeps people out of the commercial business of selling your variety. Okay,
so now, can any wild plant that has a seed be patented, or does it have to be combined with a domesticated plant?
It kind of depends a little bit. The whole idea of patents in general, and even the Plant Variety Protection Act works that way, is that it's supposed to protect something that's new and that's a human invention. So if you just found something that was totally wild, that's part of nature and it can't be protected or patented. With the plant patents, it's funny. If you find something grown in a cultivated area, in other words, a chance seedling that came up, but it's a cultivated area, it's not out in the forest, then you can patent it. Because the idea is that it came from some plants that people were growing. It's partially an invention of human beings, and you're the owner because you found that thing, and you're also kind of the plant inventor because you selected out of all the little seedlings that came up, you decided this one was better, and this is the one you decided to reproduce and keep. If it's a plant growing in a cultivated area that you found, and it's obviously something that came from previous cultivations. You can get a patent on that. If you went out in the middle of nowhere and found something that was totally wild, you could not protect it.
In other words, for us to patent any kind of plant from a seed, anyways, we would have to somehow cross it with something else that's already been domesticated, or as you said, already been on cultivated land.
Exactly.
Okay.
But for seed protections, you want, and actually this is where both the Protection Act and the Plant Patent Act run pretty much together, and maybe I can quickly run over that for you. You basically want something that's new. In other words, it hasn't been known before and it's never been sold before. In the U.S., something that is sold stops being new 1 year after you made the first sale. So for anybody that wants to protect a plant, cannabis strain or whatever, or any kind of invention, they can't make any sale or offer for sale this thing more than a year before they make an application for their patent or for their protection. For plant breeding, there's certain exceptions for doing kind of like experimental runs to see if the thing is any good. But if you're actually selling it out there commercially, then you cannot get protection after 1 year. And for both plant protection and for plant patent, the plant has to be new and it has to be distinctive. In other words, it has to be sufficiently different than the other plants of the same variety, the same species, that you could. That's usually a matter of how big it is, what color it is, what does it look like, what does it smell like. People are using chemical analyses for a lot of these things too. If the plant, like cannabis, has unusual chemicals that you want in it, you can show that the chemical profile is different than other varieties, and that also would render your plant distinctive.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, and the whole idea in patents generally, and this applies to plant inventions also, is that you're supposed to be getting a government right to keep other people away from your invention in return for making something new. And so that the first test is to find out whether it's new or not. In other words, it hasn't been around for more than a year, and not only is it new, but that it's better in some way or distinct or an improvement. And so those are the kind of the two things you have to look at. And when people apply for these, either varietal protection or for plant patent, the examiners do a lot of searching of the literature and of what's known in agricultural literature or whatever literature, plant patent literature, for something that looks similar, and then they usually ask you to prove that your thing is not the same.
I see. So let me take you back a little bit. Speaking of the federal government, is it legal now, today, to patent the cannabis genetics, since it's illegal federally?
That's one of the weird things that a lot of people run into, and you may be thinking of that a little bit because in terms of trademarks, you've probably heard that because it's something that's illegal, you can't get a federal trademark on it because there's a specific thing in the trademark law that says that they won't give a trademark to anything that's illegal.
I think it's the assumption that a lot of us make about it. That, I think it's, we confuse both things. Does that mean that it is, as far as on paper, legal for someone, to take their genetics in as long as they've got the right documentation and say, hey, this is my strain, I got it in the book?
As far as the patents or the plant varieties are concerned, the legislation doesn't say anything about legality or illegality. And so as long as your plant fits the other criteria, in other words, it's distinctive and it's new, then is eligible for protection. The trademark is a funny one. That's I'm sure there are others, but to my knowledge, because of course this is the area that I work in, to my knowledge, the only kind of intellectual property, federal intellectual property that has a no-no attached to it in terms of illegal things like cannabis is the trademark. Patents, they've been actually some of the earliest cannabis patents, not for varieties of cannabis, but for use of cannabis extracts and all, are patents that are actually owned by the federal government, that somebody like in the NIH or something with federal money applied and got a patent.
That's interesting.
So there's actually hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cannabis-related patents, and quite a few of them are actually owned by the government.
So what are the few of the things that need to be done in order to get a plant patent?
Right. Okay. Well, it all revolves around the fact that your plant has to be new and distinctive. And in the case of a plant patent, remember we mentioned that it's for asexually reproduced plants. So you have to demonstrate that it's new, and that it's distinctive, and that it can be asexually reproduced. Now, obviously, for cannabis, that's not any kind of a problem, because an awful lot of growers reproduce things from cuttings anyway. And
Right.
Some of the more sophisticated growers actually use tissue culture, which is another means of asexual reproduction. So cannabis is eligible for plant patents. And to date, to my knowledge, there's one that's been granted about 2 years ago called Ecuadorian sativa.
Okay.
You may have seen that plant patent. And there's a second plant patent that I wrote that has been allowed, but it won't probably be granted or published for another couple of weeks. If you check the patent office records, you can see that on the surface, about a half a dozen plant patents for cannabis have crashed and burned, and there's probably dozens or hundreds of them hidden, because you can't usually find out about patents until they've gone bad or they've issued. But there are probably a bunch of other plant patents kind of behind the dam, and now that the dam is open, you're probably going to see a bunch of them coming out.
Yeah, I'm sure that's in the near future.
Yeah, that's in the near future. The problem is that, like everything in the world, writing patents is highly specialized, and writing plant patents is even more specialized. And as I said, most of the plant patents through the years have been for things like fruit trees, and especially for rose bushes, of all things. So there's massive numbers of fruit tree patents, massive numbers of rose patents, and other kinds of flower patents. They're written in a very specific way. That there's a way to write them. Part of it's botanical. You have to make a lot of botanical measurements, a lot of botanical description, and there are a few other things that you have to touch upon. And to date, many of these plant patents in the cannabis space that crashed and burned because the people that wrote them didn't know how to write them, and the things contained fatal errors, and they just gave up trying to see if they could get the examiner to help them correct the problems.
Oh, I see. So then the obvious question that I come to is there anything stopping, let's say, a big company like Bayer going out into the cannabis market, buying a bunch of seeds, doing all of the lab testing and all the measurement and the work, and claiming that patent on those varieties?
Well, you're part of the story that you build up when you make these things is that you describe how the plant cross was made or how these things were discovered, and a little bit of history. And basically, when you're writing these things, the inventor essentially has to declare an affidavit or swear at the end that he or she did all these things. This is true. So if Bayer said that they did these crosses and came up with these things, these patents would be potentially invalid because they've been untruthful. And in fact, it would be probably fairly easy in litigation if you ever wanted to have a problem with them, to blow them away because of the ineptitude. In other words, they lied to the patent office, and that's grounds for having the patent stricken and possibly even getting a fine or something. So it's a little bit difficult for someone to do that. What's a little bit that people are worried about a little bit is that some of the growers who may have actually bred the things, who bred them years ago and they've been sold and everything, then going and trying to patent them, or some other grower try to patent them and said that I did it, Let's face it, there's not a lot of legal records, so it's a little bit hard for the patent office to always find out about this. So you probably know that there's a couple of projects. There's a public genome project that's going on cannabis that you can look around and find on the web. But basically, what people are doing is they're submitting all the old varieties, and they're recording genetic data and all, and putting it into a public database to make it easier for the patent office to look at these things and say, oh, this is not new, I can't give you a patent on this. So they're trying to make sure that none of the old stuff gets patented.
Yeah, one of the things I ran across was something called an open source seed license, which, how I understand it, it just allows a breeder to say someone can use their variety as a seed to make a new variety, but they cannot patent that. The new variety they just made. They can sell it as far as the seed or the flower, but they can't patent it because the genetic work isn't solely theirs. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, I think you understand that correctly. And the real question that I don't have the answer to is to what extent will that hold up legally? Because there's no specific statute behind something like that. I mean, we've been talking about the plant variety statutes, the plant patent statutes, the utility patent statutes that very specifically create a federal right, and they have an awful lot of detail involved in them. What you're talking about here is kind of a plant version of an open source software license. And again, the open source software licenses don't really have a lot of legislation behind them, but they do work on a contract or licensing basis, and they do hold up in the area of software. It's creative. The question is, do they hold up in the area of plant for an open plant patent? I don't know. I don't think anyone's ever litigated it. I think the idea is to try to tell people that they cannot patent these things. Well, to what extent this would give protection to the grower, I don't know, other than he would have a right or contract to sue for someone having taken these seeds and agreed to the license and then violated the license.
Yeah, I guess.
I think that's very creative. It's the different side of kind of the open cannabis type projects where you're trying to make all the old strains prior art and make them unpatentable by making them known to the patent office.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And theoretically, if your growers wanted to, they could put slightly more teeth into that by going for a plant variety protection on those seed strains.
But now let's talk about what would the cost be to get a plant variety patent?
You've sort of crossed the plant variety protection with the plant patent. They're similar in terms of what's input. Usually with a variety, plant varieties are run through the Department of Agriculture. Mm-hmm. The applications are usually simpler and less detailed than, say, like a plant patent, and they don't even necessarily require photographs or drawings, although certainly people do use them if you're trying to prove that your plant is distinctive. I really can't tell you what the cost would be for one of those. I would suspect it's hundreds or thousands of dollars. Plant patents tend to be a little bit more expensive simply because they're longer and they require more detailed work on the part of attorneys, but they're in the neighborhood of a few thousand to $8,000 or $9,000 for a plant patent, something in that area.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference, and depends on what you're trying to protect. With a seed variety thing, you can't stop the growers from saving seed. You can't stop anybody from using your genetics for future breeding. All you can do is stop someone from growing up batches and selling the seed. And similarly, with a plant patent, you stop people from making cuttings. Hopefully, you keep anybody from having growing plants to make cuttings from. You basically have those kinds of rights. The only protection you have against someone stealing the genetics is that generally, if you're selling female-only plants, it makes it a little bit harder to do the genetic works because you're never going to have the males.
So then, under the Plant Variety Protection Act, where we're protecting the seed, you can't stop anyone from using your seeds to make another cross and then benefiting for that?
No.
Really?
You can't.
Oh,
no,
wow.
Because your protection is just for your particular strain, for your plant variety. The thing is that if you kind of look at all the classic varieties, some of which have Variety Protection Act, but some of which are very old. Like if you go down to the nursery and find some golden bantam corn seed. I mean, that's a sweet corn seed variety that people have been growing for like probably 75 or 100 years. Obviously, if they had a plant variety protection for that thing, they could protect anybody else from growing up batches and saying it was golden bantam. They couldn't protect somebody from using their seed to make a new variety of corn. And in the same way, if you have a cannabis seed variety that's protected, you can't keep someone from making new varieties out of it, but you can keep someone from reproducing it to sell more seed of your strain.
Ah, okay. Wow, that clarifies a lot of my thinking about how it worked.
Right, and the only trick, and this is why you'll find a few cannabis plant-related patents that are utility patents, where you have a very unique genetic combination, or possibly even, although I don't know that anyone's done this commercially, you had like a new gene, a GMO type situation.
Okay.
That would be a utility patent, and there you could absolutely keep someone from using your genetics.
Wow. So
I think that ultimately when people have incredibly valuable new strains, particularly ones that are going to wind up being basis of pharmaceutical products, you're probably going to see more utility patents. But you have to have something real special to go to the expense and complexity of getting a utility patent.
Well, Stefan,
in other words, you just would. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. You go ahead.
I was going to thank you for getting on the phone and talking to me and explaining this to me, man. It's all
sure
a lot clearer to me. Can you do me a favor and tell people how to find you?
Well, I work at a law firm called Zuber, Lawler, and Del Duca in Los Angeles, and you can look them up. Zuber is spelled Z-U-B-E-R. If you look up the Zuber Law Firm, I don't think there's more than one, and that's much easier than trying to spell my name, which is Kirchanski. But if you look up the Zuber Law Firm, I'm there, and you can talk to me, or you can talk to other people, or ask questions.
Thanks for getting on the phone with me. I appreciate you taking the time to help me understand this. Don't go anywhere.
You're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Don't go anywhere. Everybody else, I'm going to play some music, and I'll be back. So I hope that helped you better understand how a plant patent works. At least it did for me, because before I got on the phone with the doc, I had a lot of very different ideas about how something like that came together. Again, I want to thank Dr. Stefan Kirchanski for helping me understand that. And you can find him at zuberlaw.com. Well, mi gente, my people, that's all I've got for you today. If you have a question or a comment about this episode, you can send me an email, that is inmygrow@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at inmygrow. So everybody, please remember, if this show has educated you or entertained you or even given you a little escape from your day, go to patreon.com/inmygrowshow and donate a couple of bucks. That money really does help me keep this show going. It helps me buy equipment. I need to get another microphone, by the way. It also helps me pay for hosting fees. And every amount's appreciated. $1, $2, $1 million. It's all appreciated. You can also go to inmygrow.com, click on the tab that says support the show, and you can order a t-shirt. That money also helps support the show. Another easy way to help financially is to click on the Amazon link in the show notes before you go shopping. That will let them know that we sent you, and the show gets a commission. Now, if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it, I get it. Here's how you can help though. Subscribe to the website, subscribe to the podcast, and tell 3 other people about the show. Remember, you can find the show on the Stitcher app and on the Google Podcast app. If you are a cannabis company and you want to advertise to our worldwide audience, you can send me an email, once again, that is inmygrow@gmail.com. Now next time, I'm going to have expert grower and Green Flower Media contributor Derek Gilman with me. He was cool enough to sit down and have a conversation about growing cannabis and the industry itself. Alright, brothers and sisters, well, I'm going to get on out of here. Don't forget that I love you all very much, and remember to always grow, learn, and teach.